Welcome to this chapter of Big Ear Provider Training. In this chapter, we're going to be discussing and seeing real-life examples of both good impressions and bad impressions. As you know by now, impressions differ greatly from earplugs. An impression is an actual ear mold of both the inner ear and the full outer ear of a customer in order to make specialty product at the lab. The most common bad impressions are characterized by shiny areas in the helix and bowl areas. Here we have an example of an underfilled outer ear bowl. Now, this is not an earplug, so since it is an impression, we need all the information of the ear possible for the lab. Please don't scrimp on silicone here. By doing so, you may just have to remake it. We're going to move on and see some additional real-life examples of bad impressions. Here we have an example of an underfilled concha. The concha is the easiest to do because it is the ear bowl itself. Just make sure that you use enough material and this will get the job done. As you know, the helix is the top of the ear bowl. You need to get your tip up into the top of the ear bowl. You want to squeeze a little bit harder here and ensure that you have filled the helix completely. After all, this is what locks the earpieces in place. In these pictures, we see an example of blow-by. Blow-by may be the most common event that we will see. By not setting the auto block deep enough, as the one on the right, material can go by the auto block. Usually a blow-by impression is still a usable and viable impression as long as all the other areas are good. Now on a rare occasion, a blow-by can cause pain. Rare is probably 1 out of 3,000 earplugs or impressions that we make. So it probably won't happen to you. But what occurs is that the silicone travels past the auto block and creates a little pressure in the ear canal when it's removed. Other than that, take a look at the rest of this impression because it's perfect, but you can see why blow-by can be an issue. Here we see some examples of voids. Voids are usually caused by not having the tip in the material and aiming it up to the helix and down into the concha. We can usually deal with a small void, but these are examples of redos in these pictures. Now, insufficient canal length is probably the biggest mistake that can be made. Bottom line is that this is just not deep enough. Two things can go wrong here. First, not having the auto block set deep enough, and it will be a short impression or earplug. And second, like in this picture, the material just never came in contact with the auto block. It just went into the ear canal a little bit and that was it. The rest of the impression is fairly good, but this is the worst of all because no sound can be blocked. The canal is just too short. Now there are two possible reasons that this could have occurred. One, we didn't have the tip down into the ear canal when we first started to pull on the material. And second, the material in the tips are too hot. If it's above 70 degrees outside, you should keep your material and tips in a cooler. If it's over 90 degrees, you really don't have a choice and you must cool it. Otherwise, it will harden just outside the mixing tip and you'll never get the material to work. It just cures too fast. Now, take a long look at the photos here because these are examples of great impressions. Do want to point out one thing. These impressions do not have the auto block attached. That's something you should never ever do. We did that for example's sake. When you take an impression out of a customer's ear, you look it over to make sure that it's viable and that it's a good impression, and then you put it into the shipping box and send it off to the corporate office to be sent to the lab. We never ever want to try to finish an impression or take off the auto block.